Hi, Misha here. And be it firearms or aircraft, one day I'm going to get more people into Japanese hardware. In the past, I've shown you the Aichi D3A WWII. And today, I have the Aichi B7A, codename Grace. Although the Japanese name for this dive bomber and torpedo bomber was a Shooting Star. And this was a very advanced bomber, even at the end of the Second World War. But unfortunately, like a few other Japanese aircraft, it came too late to really matter. And nevertheless, it's interesting to check out. And this is a 1/72 scale die-cast model from D'Agostini out of Japan. In fact, the box is in Japanese. This is kind of neat. And it comes with a pretty neat color magazine. And this is based on the old IXO tooling, meaning it has a spinning propeller, removable ordnance, a pretty heavy use of metal, and gears up or down. And if you don't know about the B7, that's alright. I didn't really know much about it either, because it just didn't really make a splash. But it was a very good aircraft. This dates back to 1941, right before the events at Pearl Harbor. The Japanese were launching a new, larger, more capable, more modern class of aircraft carrier known as the Taiho class. They laid down the keel for the first example, the IJN Taiho, in July of that year. And of course, at that time, they knew the war with the West was coming. Now, this was important because these new carriers would have more advanced, more modern arrestor gear, able to let larger aircraft be hooked and land. They also had larger elevators, because in the past there was a pretty hard 36-foot limit on the size of Japanese aircraft, including dive and torpedo bombers, like the D3A or the Kate, or the B5. And with this new carrier, the Japanese Navy put out a request for a new dive bomber. They could also double as a torpedo bomber. And Aichi began work with an internal project name of AM-23. And it was an interesting aircraft from the very beginning. As you see with this model, it has an inverted gull wing, much like the F4U Corsair used in America. And much like for that reason, that this gave it better flight characteristics for operating off an aircraft carrier. It also went to an internal bomb bay, much like later American dive bombers. It had a 4-bladed propeller. It had dive brakes, and the tips of the wings could fold for storage. Now, the Japanese Navy did specify the engine to be used because they were trying to go for a common engine for kind of their medium-sized aircraft. And the prototype first flew in May of 1942, receiving the name B7. But it would actually not go into production until May of 1944. Delays were because of the engine. They were having some difficulties. Also, the airframe needed tweaking, and frankly, the war was progressively not going in Japan's favor. And so we see a lot of delays with aircraft at this time. So what do we have here? Well, it is a two-seat aircraft. The front will be your pilot and general bombardier. The rear guy will be your gunner, radio operator, and all-around observer. It's long, at about 37 feet, 8 inches, with a wingspan of over 47 feet. It had quite a few options for ordnance. It could carry 6 60-kilogram bombs, about 132 pounds each, or 2 250-kilogram bombs in the internal bay, so about 550 pounds each. Or externally, it could carry this here. One Type 91 torpedo, so a very large scale torpedo. And these would weigh anywhere from 800 to 850 kilograms, depending on the exact load. Of course, like I said, this would have to be carried externally. Why it's not on the plane right now, because it's on the stand. Although I am actually very tempted to put it on the gear just so I could put the torpedo on it. Oh, well, we can say that there's ordnance in the bay. So it had respectable bomb carrying capability, but it wasn't all that greater than its predecessors, and a lot of this had to do with the engine the Navy specified, and also they gave a max gross weight limit to Aichi, so the plane still had to be relatively svelte. It had pretty good defensive armament, at least better than its predecessors. It had 2 forward-facing 20mm cannon. Also in the rear, it had one 7.92, so 8mm Mauser, Type 1 heavy aerial machine gun. And they would start to make these, the first version, B7A1. They'd really make 9 of, and they would kind of consider these pre-production models. They would very quickly go to the B7A2, which had an improved engine, a few other airframe changes and updates. And they would also replace that 8mm flexible machine gun in the rear with a, improved 13mm cannon. And they would build 80 B7A2s beginning in May of 1944. But then in May of 1945, the factory would be hit by a devastating earthquake, and assembly would be halted. Of course, by 1945, the war, yeah. When these were starting to go into service in June of 1944, the only carrier capable of operating the B-7 was the Taiho herself. And they were getting enough planes ready to go through flight testing and training up a squad and about ready to station them on board when she was sunk at the Battle of the Philippine Sea. So the first squadrons had to fly from land. And then in October of 1944, a second carrier in the class was commissioned and launched. And they were getting ready to deliver B-7s to her. And 10 days after she was commissioned, she was torpedoed, hulled, and sunk by an American submarine. So these would only operate from naval land bases, flying with just a handful of groups during the last year of the war. After the factory assembly was disrupted in May of 45, another 25 B7A2s would be assembled at a naval yard using existing parts. So if you count the A1s and A2s together, they would only build 114 of these during the war. Obviously not enough to matter, and anyway, the carriers these were meant to serve from never materialized as it happened. But it was a capable aircraft. Again, it had two cannons in the front, a smaller cannon in the rear for defense. Had a respectable bomb carrying ability. And it was fast. It could get over 350 miles per hour. And it was quite maneuverable. In fact, the B7A2 was more maneuverable than some models of the A6M, the Zero. Just kind of depending on which Zero we're talking about. But it had a lot of advancements. It definitely shows that the Japanese could improve, but it seems like their best airplane designs were just too little too late. And instead, they ended up just making more and more Zeros and using older aircraft like the B5N and D3A. But I thought this was worth talking about nevertheless. As far as the model itself, it's typical IXO D'Agostini quality. Not bad for the $25 at all. No pilot figures in the cockpit's pretty basic, but it exists. On the other hand, it is quite heavy. And it does come with a few options, like I said, gear up or gear down. And if you put it gear down, you can display it with its Type 91 torpedo. But there you have it. This just came in last month, so I thought I would do a little video. If you have any questions or comments, please post them. And if you could, like, share, and subscribe. And if you haven't, please check out some of my other Japanese-oriented videos. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.